In the final days of the election, Vice President Kamala Harris is leaning into her messaging on women's reproductive health rights, while former President Donald Trump is focused on immigration. Now, did you know that more than 40 million Americans have already cast their ballots, either by mail or through early in-person voting? And there's more on their ballots than just the race for the White House. Americans aren't just picking a president, they're also deciding who will represent them in Congress, as both House and Senate seats are up for grabs. We'll hear next from our senior political data reporter, Harry Enton, with a look at just how close this race is compared with other presidential races in history.
The race is close, but if we want to break it down into some numbers here, look, this to me is the simplest way to sort of show up.
The weekend, there was like a rally. There was a rally for Trump, and so this is something that some analysts are talking about. Pennsylvania, hey, you should not be talking right now. No one should be talking right now. Joseph, be quiet. So Pennsylvania, they have a lot of Puerto Ricans, and there was basically a speaker at a Trump rally that said some pretty questionable or say mess up stuff about Puerto Rico. And so some people are saying now that might impact Pennsylvania a lot because there's so many Puerto Ricans within that state. That's what some analysts, some political commentators are kind of pointing to, because it's these battleground states that really are going to decide the election. The ones where there's enough undecided voters that it could go either way. Utah is pretty set. Utah basically always votes Republican. California always votes Democrats. People aren't really paying attention as much to those states. It's more the states that are swing states. It's Pennsylvania. They showed a map, Nevada. Sometimes Arizona is a swing state. So some of these others, Wisconsin.
Mathematically, Kamala Harris likely must carry 3 of these 4 states to win. These are the states that are most likely going to determine who the next president of the United States is. You look in North Carolina, look at this. Donald Trump with less than a point lead. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, that great blue wall in the Great Lakes states. Harris ahead by less than a point, less than a point, less than a point. When you're showing the 4 most important states and the margin in all 4 of them is one of the candidates up by less than a point,
Okay, real quick, it shows MI, so you all know what state that is? I don't answer that. But so there's Minnesota. Look, MI is Minnesota. Who's the governor of Minnesota? It's Tim Walz. Who is Tim Walz? He's running as Harris's VP. So if he's the governor of that state, you think that state, probably there's a decent chance that they vote for her if he's the VP? That probably is going to help quite a bit. So it's basically going through these are some of the most important states that each candidate has to win. Yes.
Did you see the Kamala Harris flag on the bridge in Bacon?
What?
There was a Kamala Harris flag in the bridge down.
In Utah?
Yeah.
I don't think
I'm not quite sure there's any other way to put it than this race is really, really close. So let's just say that the polls were exactly 100% correct. And so the results match the polls, and Harris wins Pennsylvania up here in blue. What does that mean? Well, it means Kamala Harris gets 276 electoral votes. Of course, you need 270 to win, hence the road to 270. So she just gets over that mark. But it's so simple.
Hey, real quick, looking at this map, I want to just communicate the idea, because you look at that, it looks like there's a lot of red area. It's all based, though, on population. So those blue states, even if it looks like less land, they're highly populated. And so the highly populated areas, they get more votes. Okay, so you could have someone that, you might look on a map and you're this person won Alaska. Alaska's way bigger than, Massachusetts. But Massachusetts, it's a bigger population, so it carries more votes with it. So it's not just based on land, it's based on total votes. And a lot of these blue areas, pretty populated. California, it is big, but it's also just huge population. New York's a big population. Okay, so it's, again, not land, it's population.
So simple to give the election to Donald Trump. So I mentioned Pennsylvania. What happens if the results match the polls exactly, but Trump wins Pennsylvania? We turn Pennsylvania light red or pink. Then we get Donald Trump at 281 electoral votes. When just one state, flipping one state, could turn a loser into a winner and vice versa, I'm not quite sure that there's any way else to put it than what I said at the very top. This race is close. So, we're talking about all this, and oftentimes I say this race is historically close, and, we look at the popular vote polls. So I decided to do it a slightly different way, which is, okay, what I'm going to do is, at the end of each election cycle, I said, okay, how did the polls look and what was the projected count in the Electoral College? Well, at this particular point, if the polls are exactly right, Kamala Harris would get 276 electoral votes. That is the lowest level for a leader at the end of a campaign in terms of the projected electoral map going back since at least 1972. In 2000, Al Gore was projected to get 281 electoral votes. Of course, the polls missed in Florida. It flipped. George W. Bush won that campaign. In 2004, look at that. George W. Bush was projected to get 296 electoral votes. The polls were actually pretty gosh darn close. The only state they missed was Wisconsin, actually. That state flipped into John Kerry's column. But the bottom line is this. At this particular